Okay, so patch 10.12 for TFT launches, tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow. So I wanted to take a moment to go through all the patch notes, kind of give a note to everything that's changing with this patch, give some of my thoughts on this patch, and then once we've gone through all this patch, I want to finish up by kind of discussing my thoughts on set 3 up until this point of set 3.5, whatever we're calling it. So let's dive on in. We'll get back to the highlights later. Some new little legends for everyone to collect. No people like that. We're getting a new Galaxies seasonal pass for this half season that we're having. Um, so this will last all the way through, I believe they said mid-September. So this will last a good 3.5 months for you to work on this new season pass that they have. Um, it's probably going to look a lot like the previous season pass where you're unlocking some arenas, emotes, booms, and probably get a few little legend eggs while you're at it. So, new traits. So, some traits are falling out, and to replace those, and we'll get to those traits that are falling out. And to get to those, before we get to those, we'll talk about what's coming in. First, we have Astro. So, there's 3 new Astro champions. I believe it's 3. No, it's 4. There's 4 Astro champions. And if you have 3 Astro champions, they reduce their mana cost by 30. Be interesting. Battlecast is kind of a new frontline class, which I find interesting because they didn't get rid of any frontline classes. But Battlecast is kind of a frontline-ish class, I would say. But very unique in that, so it's a 2, 4, 6, 8. So you can get it with 2, you can get it with 4, so you can kind of flex it in, or you can make it a mainstay comp at going 6 or 8. I don't know how viable that is. We'll get to that later. But Battlecast champions, after dealing or taking 10 instances of damage, they heal if they are below half health, or deal damage if they are above half health. These numbers, the way they scale, 2 is very weak, 4 is okay, and 6 seems kind of good. I think this 325 seems like a lot to me. 600 is probably game win. If you're running 8 Battlecast, which I assume there's not 8 Battlecast because I can't remember. This is probably very difficult to stop. There's a new champion that has Paragon. She is a Star Guardian, and the way she functions is that, and we're going to talk about this one a good bit because I have some questions on this one. She makes all Star Guardian damage, true damage, and all other champions that you have magic damage on their basic attacks. I have thoughts on this, and we'll get to that later when we get to the actual champion. So, new champions. So here's our 4 Astro champions. We have Nautilus, a new Vanguard, who looks pretty similar to the previous Nautilus, where it's a CC effect, kind of frontliner with CC. Probably not very different from Nautilus from set 2. Bard is very unique, and I think there's a lot of talk about is Bard, how good Bard is, how usable he is. So Bard's ability is passive. He gains mana. He gains extra mana with each attack. But what he does is he spawns a Meep with his ability, and that Meep can be sold for 1 EXP. That's very unique in terms of how people are going to be leveling now. This could change. This could change how you level. Now, it's also worth noting that he's a tier 3. If this was like a tier 1 or tier 2, this would probably be something you would use pretty regularly, I would think. But being a tier 3 puts him into the mid game, and you're obviously probably going to take him out in the late game because 1 EXP is not worthwhile. So we'll have to see on how Bard fits in, because he's most likely just like a transition champion. Gnar effectively is replacing Cho'Gath. So Gnar, when he becomes Mega Gnar when he fills up his mana bar, which He then starts throwing enemies, stunning them, and gets a bonus health and attack damage. So he's replacing Cho'Gath, who is leaving. So this is basically a 1-for-1 in most of your brawler builds to go play Gnar. I suspect Gnar is a lot better than Cho'Gath as well, and probably has a little more carry potential. Teemo, I'm kind of interested in Teemo. I'm kind of interested in playing around with him. So he's a tier 4 Astro Sniper. And the way he works is he scatters a bunch of traps on the battlefield that will either automatically explode or explode when an enemy is near them, dealing decent damage. Like, you have to remember, this is times 3, because there's three of these traps. Deals decent damage, knocks them down, and then puts a 4-second slow effect. Now remember, he's a sniper. This is probably a pretty good ability. But from what I've seen, it's also kind of hit or miss. Sometimes this ability just whiffs. It's just kind of how the ability functions. This ability might get tweaked a few times based on what I've seen, because sometimes he'll throw the mines, all 3 will hit on a single unit, instantly blow it up. Other times he'll throw mines at something that's moving and they'll never get hit. Illaoi, I think. Tier 1 Battlecast Brawler. So this will allow you to get very early Brawler 2. Should be a good opposite of getting an early Vanguard 2, which is very common to run, like Poppy and what's the other one Vanguard? The one Cyber Vanguard, Leona. It'll be a good comparison to play those 2 Brawlers over those 2 Vanguards. But anyway, launches a tentacle that steals armor and magic resist from a target for 4 seconds. Probably a good early game champion, not so much a good late game champion, as you noticed, tier 1. Nocturne, new infiltrator. So he stuns a target and deals kind of notable magic damage over that time. These aren't big numbers, but these are really good utility numbers. I'd have to see how much mana this ability costs, because if this could cast a lot, this is probably pretty decent, I think. Kog'Maw, there's been some talk about Kog'Maw, that this Kog'Maw is pretty decent, and with the right items can kind of trash a lot of champions. That said, he's a tier 2 unit, and most tier 2 units, in my opinion, are not very good in this game. It's been a while since we've had really good tier 2 units, but this ability seems good. Having infinite attack range is always good. I always adore seeing infinite attack range written on things. So I think he'll be good. He's a new blaster, which makes it a lot easier to hit. You can hit blaster 4 really easy now, because now that makes 6 blaster. Yes, 6. No, they got rid of a blaster, so there's still only 5 blasters. So you can hit 4 blasters earlier in the game, I suppose, is probably the change they've made here. And playing blaster 4 will be a bit more consistent than it was in the previous patches. Cassiopeia, I know a lot of people have talked about this, because so Cassiopeia is a tier 3, launches her fangs at an enemy and causes them to take ginormous amounts of damage over 12 seconds. Ginormous. These are huge numbers. But the damage is over 12 seconds, and 12 seconds is also a long period of time. So I believe this is less damage effectively. I shouldn't say it is. It's likely less damage than red buff does. But red buff is done over a shorter period of time. I'd have to see this. I know there's been talk about Cassiopeia being fairly good unit. I'm kind of interested in this because there's not a lot of stuff that actually has shields anymore. So not a lot of stuff that sees play, I should say, that has shields anymore. So we'll keep an eye on this. Victor is, from what I've heard, very good. So Victor's ability puts a burns a path between two enemies most distant from one another, dealing percentage damage based on health, magic damage, and then 1 second later dealing extra damage and an explosion in the same path. This is you can get this. I'm highlighting this because tier 4 champions can be 3-starred. This can happen. This is a lot of damage combined with this explosion. It's going to kill things. Victor, from what I've heard, is very, very good in the PvE. I'm going to have to mess with him. Urgot! Urgot, from what I've understood, is kind of busted. So Urgot fires a drill that essentially insta-kills something. That's his ability. He just insta-kills something. And then that ability gets cost reduction. I don't know what to say about it. This ability is straight up kill. Now that said, he's Battlecast Protector. Protector is a notably terrible trait class, and we'll go over that a bit later when I give my thoughts on this set. But this ability is pretty much free kill, and the mana cost, if I recall correctly, is not that high. So I've got my eyes on Urgot. It seems like he's a pretty significant carry in a handful of builds. Janna. Okay, Janna was something I wanted to talk about. And so we haven't gotten to it yet, but one of the things that's being removed from set 3.5 is Void. And the reason that we've been given for Void getting the Disappearing Act is that true damage is essentially uncounterable. There is really nothing you can do to not die from true damage. If something is doing true damage, none of your defensive items mean anything. You just take the damage and you get mollywopped in the face. That's not a good look, I would say. It's not great. So, in return, we have Janna. Janna is a Paragon. Makes all your Star Guardians do true damage. So, if we're getting rid of Void, because Void did true damage, why would we add something in that adds true damage? That's what I don't understand. I'm also not a big fan of the second part ability where everything changes from physical damage to magic damage. It messes up your itemization. And at tier 5, that's probably going to be a problem. If you've built nothing but AD items the entire way, and you get a Janna, and your opponent's stocked up on defensive items, and then you put in Janna, doesn't that mess up your build? I'm not quite sure how items combined with the Paragon trait work. So we're gonna have to see that. That said, Howling Gale is an absolutely absurd ability. It pretty much CCs the entire board. The entire board essentially gets CC'd by this ability if you put Janna in a corner. It's basically bigger than the biggest alts you could get on Misfortune. This is kind of nutty. Not to mention the fact this is a gigantic speed boost. Janna's ability alone is incredibly powerful. Next up is Riven. So Riven is unique. Riven is probably the first Blade Master that's getting significant use out of magic damage. That said, as someone who uses Deathcap Aurelia, it's not really the first time, but specifically, Riven does a lot of magic damage. She's being built to essentially be a Blade Master that is meant to be a carry in a Blade Master specific build. She kind of replaces Kale in a way, but functions a bit differently than Kale, where Kale was put me in a corner, protect me with your life. Riven's gonna flash around all over the battlefield, blowing shit up, kind of like Aurelia. But I'm interested in playing a lot of this. Her being Chrono, I think, is very compelling to playing her. Chrono Blade Masters is generally considered to be a pretty good combination of traits. Just saying. Vayne. Vayne's a champion I am incredibly happy for. Why? Because Vayne is cybernetic. We'll get into my issues with cybernetic later, but having a 7th cyber that isn't a tier 5 unit is incredibly helpful to people who regularly play Cyber, which would unfortunately be me. Anyway, she's also a sniper, so we now have 5 snipers in the game. So we have a new tier for snipers that I think they talk about later. Anyway, she tumbles, so she's kind of a lot like Lucian, where when she ults, she starts jumping around, shooting things. Good attack damage buff. She's gonna be a placeholder in your. You're gonna put her in most of your Cyber builds because you're desperate to get Cyber 6 because of just the way Cyber functions. Zed is interesting. So Zed has no actual cast. He has a passive ability. So every third attack, he steals AD and deals bonus magic damage. So from what I've seen, Zed is actually a carry. Like, you can play Zed, and Zed will actually carry. Being an infiltrator makes him very unique in that he can, if you're trying to corner or backline your carry, and Zed jumps on the carry and starts stealing your attack damage, that's probably going to be a problem. So, Zed is a champion to keep your eye out on. I suspect he's going to be part of a lot of builds. Removed. So we kind of talked about this. All the Void and all the Valkyries are gone. What does this mean? Like, you don't have Void. Like, all 3 Void champions, Kha'Zix, Cho'Gath, Vel'Koz are gone. All the Valkyries, Kai'Sa, Kayle, and Misfortune are gone. These all saw significant play, especially near the end of the set. Kayle kind of functioned with every build you could imagine. You could basically play anything and throw Kayle in, and it worked out well. Misfortune was kind of the same. You almost always played her to get a second Valkyrie, and she had one of the best ults in the set. Kai'Sa really only saw play in Mech Infiltrator, but like, you could give her a Morello and a Demos pad. She was really good. Meanwhile, the Void champions were just like, you played them to get Void damage, or you played Vel'Koz to get an extra sorcerer, Cho'Gath to get an extra brawler. Anyway, they're all gone. Also leaving us is Sonya, who we'll get into issues with Sonya that I had with Sonya later. Sonya kind of lost her place in the game, in my opinion, where she was supposed to be kind of just a rebel healer, but she moved into being a mana battery for a bunch of other builds, and they got rid of her healing and gave her a debuff removal. Like, it was all awkward what they were doing with Sonya, so I approve of getting rid of Sonya. They got rid of Lux. Lux, there's a theme with these two. Lux and Kassadin were the best CCers in the game. In fact, Kassadin, I would argue, was kind of breaking the game in a way. Lux had a ridiculous AoE CC that was just bonkers to watch. It would just fly all the way across the board, hit like 3 units, and they'd all just sit there, and it was like, okay, this feels too good. Kassadin, on the other hand, and I'm debating, I'll go ahead and talk about Kassadin now. So Kassadin... So the thing with Kassadin, when this set originally came out, Mana Reaver required you to have 4 Mana Reaver champions in order to get Mana Reaver to proc. They realized that was absurd and that no one ever built Mana Reaver, because having 4 champions to trigger that was kind of dumb. So they lowered that down to needing 2 Mana Reavers and lowered the power of it just a bit. Either way, Mana Reaver was an incredibly good trait. Combined with the fact that Kassadin's ult was an AoE disarm, was getting kind of ridiculous. So Kassadin, what kind of got me with Kassadin was that it was pretty common to, when you were positioning your champions, your primary sources of damage were either going in on the left side in the top left, on the right side in the top right, or somewhere in your backline. And oftentimes, I would usually play my champions in the top left or top right, so that way I'd avoid some dumb infiltrator stuff. It was very difficult to target things that were put in top left and top right. Kassadin, however, had an AoE disarm, so if you put Kassadin on that side of the board with the carry, it would disarm the entire front line you put in front of the carry along with the carry. It was a lot of disarm. Like, I often got triggered watching Kassadin alts, because Kassadin alts would regularly disarm like 5-6 champions, and it was just like, this is absurd. So I'm not going to cry any tears of Kassadin leaving the game, because I think he kind of needed to, especially like the upper tiers, where planning to not get disarmed by Kassadin was starting to get a little bit difficult for a lot of people, I think. Galaxies, we'll talk about, I think I'll talk about Galaxies later, but Lilac Galaxy is leaving us, and good riddance for that. But we'll get into the Galaxies part later. Ranked. So we're getting a soft reset. Essentially, that means that we're all jumping down 1 rank, and we're getting our standard of 5 games that are 5 provisional games where we don't lose LP. That seems to be the standard. We're also going to be getting our rewards here someday for the previous sets. It's been asked about a lot. I'm not quite sure why it hasn't happened, but I'm not going to be upset about it. It's just odd that it's taken so long for us to get these. Galaxy balancing, I don't think they changed anything outside the fact they removed Lilac, so a bunch of other things got brought up again. Some minor miscellaneous changes. I'm going to talk about this one later. This could have been a significant change, but it probably really isn't, about having 2 more tier 3 of each champion in the pool. It's probably not overly significant, but I'll talk about it later, because I want to talk about carries, in particular the tiers of carries. But I'll go into that after we get through all of these. They're changing the gold returns for champions, so tier 1 champions, no matter what star level, will give back full gold. So there's no reason not to just spam click all the tier 1 champions, because you can always sell them back at full price. All the champions after that, so your tier 1, your tier 2s, your tier 3s, your tier 4s, tier 5s, if you 2-star them, they will sell at 1 gold less than the cost. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a tier 3 champion, sell value of 5, it is now 8. So if you 2-star tier 3, it used to sell for 5 gold. Now it sells for 8 gold. You spent 9 gold to make it. I actually think this isn't good. And the reason I think this isn't good is because it devalues picking up tier 2 champions. I think that's kind of been a problem, is the power level of tier 2 and tier 3 champions. I have a lot of thoughts about the current state of carries in this game, but this significantly devalues making a 2-star tier 2 champion. Even though you actually do get more gold off it, when you compare that to 2-starring a 3-star champion, like, percentage-wise, you've spent more gold into doing it. The value of having that 2-star tier 2 champion, there's more gold being thrown away doing that than if you were to get a 2-star tier 3 champion. And it's all percentage based. So, for example, the 2-star tier 3, it costs you 9 gold to make, and you get 8 gold back. Whereas the tier 2 2-star champion costs you 6 gold to make, but you get 5 gold back. It's a percentage loss there that's relevant. I think eventually they will revert this somewhat-ish. Probably not entirely, but to make it so that it's more consistent across the board, percentage-wise, how much gold is being lost when you make that 2-star champion. Because the biggest issue with this is it means that stocking your bench is less harmful, outside of the interest gold. You used to not stock your bench because you didn't want to just make 2 stars that you didn't need, because you were literally throwing away gold when you did that. So we'll see what happens with this, but I do think this will change. Shop changes, so they've increased at level 4 your odds of getting a tier 3 champion, and at level 9 same thing, and decreased your chance of getting a tier 4. So more opportunities to get tier 3s, which falls in line with the fact that they put more tier 3s in the pool. Kane will no longer drop a spatula item if you have 0 of that trait on the board. I can't. It is unreal how frustrating it is to get the Kane and get a spat item. It is unreal how frustrating it is. I'm honestly surprised they didn't just make it so he never drops spat items. That's how frustrating it got. Nico's help now works regardless of the champions in the bag. So to kind of explain what this means, there's a total pool of champions in the bag, which is what this is referencing. So there's a total of 18 of a single champion in the bag. If all 18 of those were taken, and that's the way it used to work, and you used the Nico on that champion, the Nico would just go back to your item pool and nothing would happen. And you'd be really confused as to what was happening because you just slammed the Nico on something and nothing happened. So now that Nico just makes that champion. And my understanding is that that champion is not counted in the total pool, but only in this specific situation. That's a lot to take in. So what does that mean? If you're going through and counting the number of champions, and this gets relevant in the late game when you're trying to decide whether or not you want a 3-star tier 4, you start scouting around the board to see even if there are enough champions in the pool for you to go for that. If you have a Nico's, you might be able to go for that, because you can pull a champion out of the bag even though there are no more left in the bag. Now, the important thing to realize, though, is that in situations where that happens, you made that champion up. So if you sell it, it does not actually go back into the bag. This essentially means you can still track the number of champions on the board. Nico's does not magically make a champion unless all of them are out of the bag. It's still pulling out of the bag otherwise. So you don't have to worry about Nico's if you're trying to track the amount of a certain champion on the board when you go for a 3-star tier 4. Okay, that was very wordy, but this is actually a very good change in my opinion, because Nico's help not doing anything was dumb. I did not like that. I've really only seen this happen twice. I did watch it in a pro tier game though. That was one of the times I did watch it. But it's kind of frustrating to watch someone try to get their plans up, Nico something, and it's like nothing happened. So let's move on to some of the trait changes. You know what? I need a drink first. Hope you guys don't mind. Alright, Blademaster changes. Blademaster, I believe this is Blademaster 4. No, it's 369. Blademaster is a 369. So Blademaster 6, significant buff to number of attacks. This essentially comes out of the fact that we've gotten rid of Kale. Because they've gotten rid of Kale, they can get away with doing this. Because if Kale was still in here and they had this, oh my god, you just run Kale every game. Brawler, slight nerf to 4 Brawler. I think that's because they expect Nari to be a lot better than Cho. I think this is pretty much specifically because Nari is going to be a lot better. Because they got rid of Kassadin, you now require Celestial Orb to get Celestial 6. Yeah. Celestial Healing at Celestial 4 and 6 got a buff. You're not going to play Celestial 6. It's a bait. Celestial 4, on the other hand, you may probably not play, because the only time you'd ever play Celestial 4 was with Kassadin. I don't think you'd ever play Celestial 4. I'm mentally going through the loops in my head required to play Celestial 4 now. And I don't think you would ever play Celestial 4. Still thinking. I want to run down this thread in my mind. Yeah, you're not going to get Celestial 4 because that means you have to run a Protector. Or you don't run the Protector. And I don't see this happening. Chrono 8. Chrono 8's a bait. Cybernetic. So Cybernetic is getting a health nerf at 6, which is fair because they're adding in a new Cybernetic that's at tier 3. But is getting a AD buff. I don't know what the AD buff is about. I'm not quite sure why Cybernetic is getting it. but I'll take it because I play Cybernetic way too much. Dark Star. So they got rid of Lulu, so they have to set new breakpoints for Dark Star. So instead of being a 369, it's now a 2468. This is actually a pretty big change that's coming up here. So Dark Star bonus. So it went from a 369 to now it's a 248. Now these numbers look really low, but that's because Dark Stars now get their damage buff whenever any ally dies, rather than just Dark Stars. So this was a big striking point with Dark Star 3. You could play Dark Star 3, but this buff was kind of meaningless because you only had 3 Dark Stars. You'd have to lose your 2 other Dark Stars. You'd get a small bonus damage. Like, there was no point in playing 3 Dark Stars. You in general just played 6, or I think a lot of people played 5. That six didn't have the returns you wanted for the slot you were giving up to probably play Jarvan. So this has been changed to the point that this is probably more useful. I don't think 6 Dark Star is very good, but I suspect 2 and 4 are pretty good. Well, maybe not 2. 2 is weird because 2 is only adding 8. That's very low. It's very, very tiny. You would probably do it out of convenience because your build had a Jhin and you had a slot open for another Dark Star. That's how you end up with 2. 4, on the other hand, is a decent amount if your entire board is buffing because of Dark Star. So I look for Dark Star to be a lot better now. Infiltrator is getting a nerf. I assume that's because Zed is really good. Is kind of my assumption as to why Infiltrator is getting a nerf. Because it's worth noting that in the last patch, Infiltrator got a pretty significant nerf in its insta-jump. And that now it can hit things that are tanking. So I suspect that Infiltrator is getting a nerf now because Zed is a pretty good champion. Mystic's getting a buff. Mystic didn't see enough play in the set, but I don't really think that's because Mystic was bad. In fact, I think the Mystic champions were all pretty good. But I'll cover my thoughts on Mystic when we talk about Protectors in the post-patch, because Protectors are crap. This buff probably doesn't change that fact. Sniper is getting a nerf because I think snipers were going to be played quite a bit in this set. But we do get Sniper 4. That's a plus. Sorcerer, there's no longer an 8 Sorcerer. You can't do it. There's not enough Sorcerers. Sorcerer, what is it? Sorcerer is a 2/4/6. So you're getting a small buff at 4. That's to be honest, 4 is probably where you're most often going to be with Sorcerers, is running 4 Sorcerers. So this could actually be kind of notable, but I doubt it. Star Guardian is getting a nerf, but it's getting a nerf because they fixed a bug. So for those who didn't know, for all of set 3 so far, Star Guardian has been bugged. It grants diminishing returns over time. So each time Star Guardian procs, it gives less and less mana. This was a bug. It wasn't supposed to work like that. And apparently nobody found this out until like 2 weeks ago. Which is awkward. Because we've had a few times during this set where Star Guardians has been entirely meta. So to find this out now, a little bit weird. Not gonna lie. Also, you now get Star Guardian 9, so this is Star Guardian 9. Vanguard is making me angry because they did not nerf Vanguard 2, like I had politely asked them to multiple times, but they are buffing Vanguard 4, which I did not ask for many times. Also getting Vanguard 6, which is a bait that adds 1,000 armor. That said, good luck fucking killing this shit. Mech Pilot gets its own section because Mech is getting a lot of changes. So, the way Mech works now is when the Mech is destroyed, the pilots come out at 35% health rather than at 100% health. rather than go through all of these and what that means, it means that they can make the mech a lot better. They can make the champions a lot better without having to have mech be completely busted. So what you see here is a ton of buffs for mech, notably in armor and magic resistance, because when everyone pops out of the mech, they have less health. You'll also see later, pretty much all the mech champions got buffs. I assume the thought being is that they want you to be able to play a lot of the mech pilots outside of mech, which pretty much none of them see play outside of mech. Even in the Void Hyper Roll that people often play Fizz in, I don't think I ever played Fizz in that build. I found something more interesting to play. So, yeah, anyway, as I said, lots of buffs to mech because of this change to mech pilot health. Balance changes. Like I said, Annie's getting significant buffs, I should say. Annie's supposed to be a frontline sorcerer, which is why she is going to do twice as much damage with her ultimate now. Twice. And get more shields. Ashe with this pretty significant buff to damage, buff to mana, lot less auto attacks to throw that alt arrow out. The arrow now goes faster, but does less damage. It makes the alt more interesting. It still CCs, which is pretty relevant. Ezreal is getting what I'm going to call a functionality change. So the way Ezreal works right now in the game is you often play him for the EMP effect. The problem with that is that it does a lot of damage. It does probably more damage than it should. So, the damage is being cut in half, and they can reduce the mana cost. Since Ezreal isn't really used because he does a ton of damage, he's more used for the utility of the EMP effect. This is a pretty good buff to him, but only in his role as a utility champion. Jace gets an extra 100 health. I don't know why he's one of the better Vanguards. Most people seem to play Jace a lot. I didn't before, and then I started playing him more. Jace is one of the better Vanguards, and he's getting a health buff. My assumption on this is because people were taking Leona and Poppy too late into the game, and that they think that people should be transitioning over to Jace over Leona and Poppy. So we're getting this change. Poppy's getting a nerf. I don't know why. I don't know why they're nerfing not Poppy. They're nerfing Nico damage. I don't know why. I shrugged to read that one. Rumble HP buff. Rumble mana buff. I do worry about this. 50 mana is... When I start seeing things at 50 mana, I start staring and going into the danger zone. Because rapid ults frustrate me. Also, this was a lot of damage for Rumble. Again, like I said, they really wanted to buff the mechs, the mech pilots up. So Rumble now does a shitload of damage. Why? I don't know. I usually play... The only time I play him outside of mech is when I need a demo. Which I will spend days talking about demo when I get into my thoughts on the set. Shaco getting a damage buff because Shaco's been hit in the head with a hammer a lot. And they nerfed infiltrators again. So Shaco's getting some pretty decent buffs here. We'll see how significant that is. Syndra getting a mana buff. This is probably the more relevant change to Syndra here, because they're also nerfing her damage at 2-star and 3-star. But the new change is that the orbs that Syndra tosses, if the target that she's targeting dies, those remaining orbs will now go on to a different target. Here, we call that optimal. This makes Star Guardian a lot better if Syndra ults can now kill off 2 champions. Or finish off a champion and then go on to another. Rather than pulling a Vigar and doing infinity damage to something that's nearly dead. Yes, I call that pulling a Vigar. because I love running dumb Vygar builds. It was so stupid. Tier 4 champions. Fizz also getting a similar change. Slight damage buffs. Jin is getting a weird change here. So his attack damage is going down. Jin does a ton of damage. But he's getting a baseline attack speed buff across levels. This essentially balances out at 2-star and makes him better at 3-star. It's an interesting change. I'm not sure how impactful it's going to be, because it's still a lot of damage that Jin is going to be doing. It just makes valuing getting him up to 2-star, 3-star, even higher, which I think is kind of odd, because Jin 1-star is something that I found to be pretty weak, and that you really desperately needed to get him up to 2-star to get him rolling. Jinx 3-star rocket damage is going down because it did too much damage. It did a lot of damage. It did a lot of damage. This is something that people have been talking about a lot, because we just found out about this one yesterday, I think. Jinx no longer fire rockets with extra shots from her blaster trait. So if I'm reading this correctly, Jinx blaster traits the shots made from Jinx's blaster trait were essentially considered rockets, if I'm reading this correctly. This is a giant nerf to Blaster 4, because Blaster 4 just shoots off blaster shots everywhere. It's not so much the Blaster 2. Probably doesn't even really nerf Rebels, where Jinx is still a carrion, but is a pretty big nerf to Blaster 4. We're going to talk about Blaster, because Blaster has kind of been an odd trait this set because of the way that the Blaster trait functions. Asol is essentially getting a rework. It now starts shooting out a fighter. The fighters do less damage, but they drain mana. Is this good? I don't know. I can't tell you. I have no idea how this works. I have no idea what this looks like. All I know is you put a demo spat on Asol, it's probably still pretty good. Echo is also getting a functionality change that I approve of. So he's going to start with more mana, which is very good, because Echo has a bad habit of dying before he ults, or getting stuck in his ult animation and dying, which is really frustrating. The damage is going down, but the way he deals damage is changing. So the way Echo works now, he takes a swing at every opposing champion, does his damage, and calls it a day. Now he has a specific number of hits he's going to do. And he's going to hit champions based on who has the highest attack speed. So he's going to target with his attacks, in order, champions that have the highest attack speed. Now, at 1-star, he gets 5 attacks. Well, what if there are only 3 champions? Previously, it meant Echo would just hit 1, 2, 3, call it a day. Now he goes down the list in terms of attack speed, and continues to go down the list, because there are still things alive. So he will go back and hit another champion a second time if its attack speed is higher than everyone else's. Now, there are some bugs on this, and to add in, each hit, the reason why he attacks different champions each time in order of attack speed is because each one he hits lowers their attack speed by 50% for 7 seconds. So, now there were some bugs on this. I don't know if it's been fixed yet. There were some bugs with GA and Jin. So if you were on GA, if you GA'd, he would just kind of just keep swinging there. He could get stuck on something that was GAing, which was a problem when the champion was Jin, because Jin does not change his attack speed. Jin's attack speed is consistent, and when you change his attack speed, that changes his damage. So there was a bug in the test realm where if you hit Jin and he had a GA, so you hit Jin, Jin dies, and starts using GA, his attack speed didn't change. He's still on the field. Echo continues to hit him, even though he's still in GA form, so he takes no damage. I'm hoping this has been changed, because that's a pretty big issue with Echo. Either way, I really like this change. This is a lot of damage on 2-star Echo. It's a lot of damage that he's going to deal out. Not to mention, this slow effect is pretty impactful. This really actually does bring Echo up to the value you would expect out of a tier 5 champion, which previous Echo didn't really have. Gangplank. If you get the larger blast upgrade, the size of that has been lowered. Also, his starting mana pool has been decreased, and the amount of mana needed to ult has been increased. So it used to take 75 mana to ult, and now it takes 90 mana to ult. This gives you a chance at actually killing GP before he ults, particularly at 1-star. You're probably not going to do it at 2-star. He's probably going to get his ult off at 2-star. But at 1-star, you have a good chance of killing him before he ults, and you should probably be building your positioning based off that fact. Tank changes. I won't go through all of these, but most of your tanky boys are getting additional armor and magic resistance because they all keep getting one-shot by random champions. The only tanky boys that aren't tanky boys that are getting this are probably Asol and Thresh. And Rakan. I think Rakan's getting it. Yeah, Rakan's getting it too. Rakan's not really a tanky boy, but he does tanky-like things. Items. Let's talk about items. Bloodthirster, Lifesteal up. Okay. Chalice of Harmony is getting killed. We're going to talk about issues that have come up with Chalice of Harmony later. But it is becoming Chalice of Power, which now grants additional AP to the champions to the left and right. So effectively, it's a magic equivalent of Zeke's. DB, Deathblade, going from 30 AD a stack to 25 AD a stack, which is fair, because Deathblade kind of can get ridiculous after like 2 kills, which, like, if you've seen videos of Jhin with a Hurricane and Deathblade, it's obscene. Demo Charge is dead. I repeat, Demo Charge is dead, and we will stomp on its course at the end of this video. It's being replaced with Battlecast Plating, which gives the champion Battlecast. Giant Slayer's functionality is being changed. So Giant Slayer used to be, it just added X% damage. I think it was 12%. 12% bonus damage, period. That's pretty much it. Now it's a bonus 20% true damage, and if the enemy has over 1750 HP, which essentially puts it at most of it's basically all the brawlers at Brawler 4. A handful of champions at 2-star. If you're a tier 4 champion, tanky boy at 2-star, you're probably going to get hit with this. It now does 80% true damage instead. Lot of damage. It kills giants. It's more flavorful. I don't know how useful it is, but it is more flavorful. This is probably a better item now. The issue with Giant Slayer before was that the only thing you could really put it on was Jinx. Because nothing... You wanted to put it on Jinx or a Blaster, because nothing was hitting things fast enough to be that relevant. Hexblade. We're no longer playing around with Hexblade healing all damage, and now just heal spell damage. I don't know what I think about that. I find it odd that Bloodthirster is being buffed to 40%, while Hexblade is going to just spell damage and 35%. That feels off to me. I'm not sure I understand that. Infinity Edge is getting a pretty significant functionality change. So the way Infinity Edge worked was 100% critical strike damage. If you critted, you did double damage. Now that's changing to, you now have a 100% chance of critting and do only 20% more crit damage. I don't know how the math on that looks. I have no idea how the math looks on that. But what it does change is that champions who have an ult that crits, i.e. might not be the most effective item for them anymore. So, good examples were in Set 2 Kha'Zix and Set 3 Shaco. Both of them had ults that crit. So, you almost always wanted an IE on them because then their ult would do double damage. It was just the way it made sense. Now, you always do 100% chance of crit and do 20% more damage. This also is now a unique item. I don't know if that was really necessary, but we'll see. We'll get into the unique, because uniqueness is something that's new. Essentially, that champion can now only have one of this item. I don't really know how significant this is. It might be that this 20% just stacks up too fast. Don't know. That said, this is a pretty significant damage buff that you get with IE. There's a lot of champions that can probably take use of it. I just don't know if it's better than making Last Whisper most of the time anymore. Don't forget, Bramble Vest will block crits. You can't crit something with a Bramble Vest. So this item is entirely null and void against a Bramble Vest. Still is null and void against Bramble Vest, unless you have a Last Whisper. Jewel Gauntlet. So Jewel Gauntlet has changed from holder spells can crit to holder spells can crit and get additional 20% crit strike damage. Jewel Gauntlet is such a weird item. So, in general, Jewel Gauntlet is always worse than Death Cap. In general. Death Cap, the consistency of Death Cap tends to be far more relevant than the bonus critting of Jewel Gauntlet. Unless you had IE, where the numbers get fuzzy. And especially now if you get IE, where IE 100% crits and does additional crit strike damage. This is better, but it's probably still not as optimal as Death Cap unless you have an IE. There. Simple. Simple, right? Ludens. Ludens no longer scales with level and does 200 damage on each bounce. Essentially, this means Ludens is very good early game. Ludens probably just became better on Lucian in the early game, but it doesn't last into the late game. Ludens does not carry well into the late game. Rapid Fire Cannon. Holders' attacks can no longer miss. I believe, if I'm correct, there's only 2 champions in the game right now that can cause attacks to, air quotes, miss. Graves and Shen. You see both of them a lot, especially in the early game. I don't think this was too significant. The range buff is what's really been relevant with Rapid Fire Cannon. A lot of the range buff you get on champions made them do kind of obnoxious things. Red buff. We'll talk about red buff later, but the time duration of red buff is going down from 10 seconds to 4 seconds, but the damage percentage is actually the same. So what this did over 4 seconds is this. Let me repeat that to make sure that this is understood. What current red buff now does in 4 seconds is exactly what it is going to do now. What does this mean? This means you really need to work to spread red buff. Red buff before you could put on some single target champions and get some use out of it, but it was way more effective before if you spread it around. You put it on like Blaster 2. Red buff with Blaster 2 was a match made in heaven. Now Blaster 2 is kind of just okay with it. It's good, but it's not great. The 4 seconds really kind of kills that. Blaster 4, on the other hand, yeah, you're just going to spread this everywhere. This done on Blaster 4. These two are the exact same. Blaster 2, this is a little bit worse. Without Blaster, this is a lot worse. Blue buff replaces Seraphs. We'll get back to Seraphs. So functionally, Blue buff and Seraphs are the exact same. Functionally. Okay. Functionally, I'll say this again. Functionally, they are the exact same. The difference is it is now a set amount of mana, and they really don't even need to say unique, because it functionally is unique. This blue buff doesn't stack anymore. It doesn't functionally stack, and they will not even allow you to stack it. Good change. Mana printing is evil. We shouldn't be doing it. And I'll repeat it again when I go over my thoughts on set 3. Warmogs is getting a rework. Warmogs is in an odd place. So you could use Warmogs pretty easily in set 2. There was a handful of champions that could make good effect out of using Warmogs. There really aren't anymore. Because too much stuff kind of just gets one-shotted in the current meta. There's not a lot of attrition going on in the meta. Stuff just instantly dies to things. So, Warmogs is changing to kind of relieve a bit of that. So, instead of getting a health regen, it now gives a flat 600 health if you equip a Warmogs. Combined with the fact that you use 2 belts, it is now exactly 1,000 health you are getting by equipping a Warmogs. That's a lot of health. I'll say it again. That is a lot of health. I do think this probably isn't enough to get Warmogs seeing a lot of play. I think they're probably going to have to bring back the health regen along with that. But it probably won't be 5% missing health, because 5% missing health, along with the fact that you added 1,000 health, is probably a bit much. Bug fixes. I don't think there's a lot to talk about with bug fixes. And a lot of this is just fixing weird shit with Acel and Echo. Hurricane. I don't like this change because it puts Hurricane into a weird void. So, the shot fired with Hurricane essentially functions with every single physical damage ability in the game. So, anything that triggers off, like, physical hits, triggered off Hurricane. So, that means things like Red Buff, Sojourns, Last Whisper. The 2 notable in set 3 that it functioned off of was Jin's 4th shot got the buff, and Sniper Trait got the buff. So this meant that Hurricane shots could do shitloads of damage with Sniper. I suspect the reason that they made this change was because Sniper units have a limited range, while Hurricane really doesn't have a limited range, I believe. I don't think Hurricane actually has a limited range, but Sniper did. Well, when I say Sniper, I mean the champions did. So, they're getting rid of this. I don't like it. I don't think it's necessary. Kind of upset about it, but we'll see. The bug about putting tiers on things to get them mana mid-combat, that's been fixed. You can't do that anymore. So, there's no point to putting a tier to complete an item mid-combat. It doesn't do anything anymore. I think that was pretty much it. I don't think there was much else to talk about. Here's something interesting. I don't think this is actually in the current app, but is on the mobile app. There's now a team builder in the mobile app. I think that's neat. I kind of would like to see that in the actual game, but okay. Makes me a little disheartened that we can't get that in the base game, but we have it in the mobile game, but whatever. So, this is a new set we have, set 3.5. I'm kind of interested in where things are going. I'm going to be honest, I haven't been following the PvE that closely. I haven't played in it at all. So I'm not quite sure exactly where the meta is going to go with it. From what I've loosely heard and seen, Zed is very good. Blaster in general is still very good despite the changes that they've made to Jinx. It's played a little bit differently. There's a lot more flexibility in builds now. But we'll see what direction the meta goes from here. Now, before I end this video, I'm going to spend probably another half an hour going over what I think of Set 3 up until now. And some of it's going to be talking about things that I've kind of already discussed with patch 10.12. But I want to go over it again before I do. Another drink. Starting to lose my voice. So, I want to go over things that have changed, come into Set 3, issues that have come up with Set 3, that I'd like to talk about, kind of direction of the way the game is going, should be going, good things, bad things, so on and so forth. General thoughts on Set 3. So, the first thing I want to talk about is eco changes, and how the early game has changed with Set 3. I am very, very positive about how the early game has changed from Set 2 to Set 3. Set 2 every early game was the exact same. You took your champion off the carousel, you sold your champion off the carousel, and bought the full shop. That was every game. You got so much gold in the early game, you just continued to buy the whole shop and take whatever champions you had and made whatever you could out of it. It was very simple stuff. Like, there wasn't a lot of thinking involved. The new early game, there's a lot more thinking about what champions you want to get. What items did you get on your first 3 PvE rounds? What do those go good? What are those well with to carry you into the mid game with? There's a lot more thinking involved in what champions you want to take in the early game. I like that. It's been a good change. It's probably here to stay. I hope everyone enjoys it. Player damage. Player damage has been changed at least twice this set. First when the set came out, and then another like midway in the set. I'm not exactly okay with where player damage is. I think the damage you take from round 4 to round 5, there's a big stepping stone there, and I think it's probably a little too high. I think it's generally built so that no one gets knocked out before round 5, and then everyone starts getting knocked out at round 5. I think it needs to be a little more smooth, not like right up firing a rocket. So that's my thought. Shop drop rates. This kind of goes into another discussion I want to have. So they have tooled around with shop drop rates quite a bit this set, and I don't think it's mostly been because the number of champions has been changing through this set. I don't think it's so much because of what champions people should be using, are using, how they should be playing the game. What's kind of happened is that in the current meta, you basically have 3 carries. You have your hyper roll carry that you get at tier 1. You have a tier 4 carry, and you have a tier 5 carry. Those are generally the carries of the game right now. Pretty much every carry is either a tier 1 hyper roll, a tier 4 carry, or a tier 5 carry. What the hell happened to the tier 3 carries? At one point in this set, Shaco was a decent tier 3 carry. At one point in this set, Master Yi was a decent tier 3 carry. They killed off Master Yi. Well, to be honest, they didn't kill off Master Yi. They killed off Yasuo. And because they killed off Yasuo, you couldn't play Master Yi anymore. So, right now, the way the game is played, you either hyper roll at tier 1 to get your tier 1 champions. You slow roll to get mech, because mech's kind of the only kind of weird one. Some of the slow roll builds are kind of weird. But there's really only been 2 slow roll builds. Mech is the only one people actually play. Or you fast 8. Historically, you had fast 7, fast 8, and standard. There is no fast 7. There's no reason to fast 7. Because you went fast 7 if you wanted to get a tier 3 champion before everybody else. That was pretty much, to my logic, the only reason why you ever fast 7 in set 2. Was because you desperately needed to get a tier 3 unit to 2-star before anybody else. No one does that anymore. Because no one's really looking for tier 3 champions. Most of the tier 3 champions you can get away with slow rolling now. Because no one's really contesting those champions from you. So what it's come down to is that you really only have 3 builds. Hyper roll, slow roll, fast 8. You don't even have standard. The reason why fast 8 has become dominant is because all the carries are at tier 4 and tier 5. So everyone is rushing to get those carries ASAP. There's not a lot of variance as to where people are going. They want to get their tier 4 champions, they want to get their tier 5 champions, or they hyper roll to get a tier 1 carry. So, what this has done is this has really kind of made level timing to be very consistent across the board. And I'd rather level timing be a little more flexible than it is right now. I'm hoping that some of the champions that have been added into the game change that, but we're just going to have to see. Item drop consistency. It's a lot better than it has been before. So item drops throughout a single game are way more consistent than I think they were in Set 2. I think it's a lot better. The only issue being spat drops. Spats are like given away like candy sometimes. Spat items are given away like candy sometimes. The problem with spat items is that you need two items. You need spat and something else, and that something else needs to be useful with that spat. That's really the only issue I have with the item drop consistently right now. I would like the PvE rounds to be as consistent as possible. I think that puts a lot more balance into the game. I've seen sometimes where I've gotten... I think I had one game where I got 2 items and 3 gold out of my opening PvE rounds. That was painful. I've had some times where I got 3 items and no gold. That was painful. I've had times where I got 3 items and 8 gold. That was a pretty good day. I was pretty happy with that. But overall, its consistency is a lot better now. And they're changing how at the end of round 5, you're no longer going to get a spat item unless you already have that trade up. So hopefully this reduces the number of dumb item drops you get in the late game. Weird carousels. We quickly learned that the all-defensive item carousel is miserable existence incarnate. I don't want to see. I don't want to see the weird... The only weird carousels I want to see are full items. I don't actually want to see the all-offensive items, all-defensive item carousels. They really mess up how what items you want to get. Especially the all-defensive items, because it's rare you want to get a defensive item off the carousel after PvE. After the PvE rounds. Because you've probably gotten the item that you wanted already. Anyway, next topic, galaxies. So, thoughts on galaxies. Obviously, Lilac Nebula is pretty horrible to play. The opening carousel is just so important in the Lilac Nebula that it basically determines who's most likely to win. The problem with the Lilac Nebula is that it sets essentially 4 to 5 different people on their path to victory, and leaves 3 people with champions they can't do anything with, that they have to pivot off to something else, but everyone else has a head start of them. The gold you get off selling your champion that you got off the Lilac Nebula is, in my opinion, not worthwhile ever. So I'm glad to see that Lilac Nebula is going away. The other nebula that I need to talk about is, and I consistently complain about, I probably complain about this one more than Lilac, because at least I understand what's going on in Lilac. Galactic Armory is pretty miserable to play. I jokingly refer to Galactic Armory as Griefer's Galaxy, because everyone gets the same item, which makes sense. You don't want to give random items because there's a lot of combined items that are just not that good, and then there are others that are completely busted. Well, I shouldn't say completely busted, but significantly better than every other item. So with Galactic Armory, what often happens is that you get very specific items that are very good in very specific builds, and then everyone tries to get that specific build going before everyone else, and you just grief everybody. And it's very painful to watch and play. So good examples of when this happens is, let's suppose you get Bramble in QSS. What are you going to run? Are you going to run Mac? Everyone's going to try to run Mac. What if you get Rageblade? Everyone's going to try to run Kale. What if you get Red Buff? Everyone's going to try to find Lucian to carry them through the mid game. It's very obvious what everyone is going to do in Galactic Armory, and it's very frustrating to play Galactic Armory. My other issue with Galaxies is that, in my opinion, all but maybe 2 of them accelerate the game in ways that I'm not always comfortable with. And what I mean by that is that they do things to the game that make it so things that I would expect to see later in the game, I see earlier in the game. In particular, what I'm calling out is like 3 stars and like completely built champions. It's very it's kind of frustrating when you get into these games and you're kind of playing more standard and you go up against someone who's been like a good example is the reroll galaxy. I tend to play very standard, I think standard's one of the better ways to play that. But a lot of people like to do rerolls, and they will reroll like maniacs, and they will hit all of their rerolls and have almost an entire board of 3 stars. That probably shouldn't happen. I don't think you should ever have a game where someone's entire board is nothing but 3-star champions. I think that happens a bit too much in Star Cluster and Nico's and in the reroll galaxy. I don't really see this issue when it's dealing with items. So in like Galactic Armory and Treasure Trove, I don't think this is as much an issue because it's items. It's not so much based on the stars of champions, which are significant spikes in power. So I'd like to see more galaxies that slow the game down and make people think more. But I also understand how that, as a developer, probably isn't that fun to imagine people playing. But I do think, as a game designer, it would be a more interesting way to play. So I have my hope that we'll see things that slow down the game more, because really the only one that does is Medium Legends. And even then, that kind of goes into the problem that you start seeing people with like crazy high roll builds because the game went longer. I'd like to see more along the lines of like maybe paying, like for example, an example of a galaxy I'd kind of like to see. What if you had to pay a tax on how many champions you have on the bench? Each turn you would lose X amount of gold based on how many champions you have on your bench. That would slow the game down because you can't just like hoard a bunch of champions on your bench anymore. Just an idea. Moving on to trait and champion balance. Some of this has been fixed because as we've discussed throughout this patch, but some of it is stuff that still is an issue. So like stuff that's been kind of fixed. Cyber 6. Cyber 6 is a build. Cyber 6 also relies on you finding Echo. Echo is like impossible to find. Oh well, you got screwed by the fact you couldn't find Echo. Haha, sucks to be you. That's been fixed, so we're pretty happy. I'm pretty happy about that. Mech Infiltrator. So my issue with Mech Infiltrator is different from everyone else's issue. My issue with Mech Infiltrator is that Mech Infiltrator is the only mech build anyone plays. Early in the days, we had some Mech Sorcerer, and I think there was probably some thought at Riot that Mech Sorcerer was actually a build. Mech Infiltrator was just infinitely better. Just totally blew Mech Sorcerer out of the water. It's like Mech Sorcerer wasn't even a build by comparison to how good Mech Infiltrator was. I don't like that Mech is kind of this like bombastic premiere thing that we can be doing, and all we can play with it is infiltrators. It's maddening to me. Maddening. I wanted to see better. Star Guardian Sorcerer. So one thing that I liked in set 2 was, what was it? What was the frontline class called? I honestly have forgotten. Whoever like the Vanguard class in set 2 was, and combined with Ocean. So Thresh Nautilus. Thresh Nautilus was a very common frontline that you played in set 2. Because they were both frontline Ocean. So you could get the Ocean buff and you can get the frontline buff off just playing both of those two. I was hoping that we'd see more of that. But instead, what we got was Star Guardian Sorcerer, which had 3 Star Guardian Sorcerers. That was overkill. That was too linear. I like the idea of having a double 2-2, like we had with Thresh Nautilus. I don't like the idea of having 3 because that's just an entirely linear build. Like you're not going to do anything else but play Star Guardian Sorcerer. You're just not. Void at the end of the set, Void was kind of broken. It didn't win every time, but it did win most of the time. I shouldn't say win most of the time. It won if you had good items. You could play it and get a top 4 with it, and then if you had good items, you had a good shot at winning. True damage was just kind of uncounterable, which is why I'm kind of confused as to why Janna makes Star Guardians do true damage now. I'm not sure why they did that. I think it was a smart idea to take Voids out. I don't think it was a smart idea to put Janna in and add this Paragon trait. Kale flexibility. I like flexibility in my champions. It makes me have to think about how I'm going to build. Kale probably had too much flexibility. You could basically take Kale and make... Let me work this the other way around. You could take seven decent champions, make a decent build out of those 7 decent champions, throw in Kale and have a good build. Kale just worked with everything. I think it's a testament to how good her design was, but at the same time, it's also a testament that her design was probably much better than everybody else. Yasuo. I still am utterly confused as to why Yasuo's functionality was changed mid-set. I thought he was an excellent and unique and interesting counter to single carry builds. Riot apparently thought differently, and they removed his functionality and essentially destroyed the Blademaster build that the set had in Bangros, which I thought was a very interesting, unique, and different build for people to play. No, I guess they just didn't like it. My next point on blasters. Blasters were way too efficient at spreading Last Whisper and red buff debuffs. The debuff that it was sending out was just so efficient with Blaster to send that out. Like, just having 2 blasters, you could spread it across the entire composition for the entire duration. I think we're seeing some of the changes that they're making to Blaster with that, but the ease in which Blaster spreads out debuffs was kind of insane. Demolitionist was a mistake. I'm leaving it at that. Demolitionist was a mistake. They should not have shipped Demolitionist with this set. It's horrible to play against. There's nothing interesting about it, and we'll talk more about it later because we have more to say about it. For example, right now, Ziggs with double Seraphs was a mistake. I don't know. What frustrates me about Ziggs was they identified the issue, they made the change, and then they brought it back. Why? The good news is that Seraphs is effectively gone from the way Seraphs functioned before. So we'll leave it as is. Demo was a mistake. Infiltrator 2. So initially when they released Set 3, Infiltrator 2 was kind of horrible. Like, I'm not sure why they thought that was ever going to be decent. They did change that, so that way if an Infiltrator got a kill, it procced Infiltrator again. But I'm not quite sure why they thought that Infiltrator 2 was even going to be playable. It was bad. There weren't even champions really that were effectively good with it. They fixed this. I'm not sure whether it was a bug that did this or whether it was something intentional. Part of the reason why Mech Infiltrator was so good was that there was no way to stop the Infiltrators from like blowing up your backline, because you could put your you could put your tanky champions in the backline to try to pull aggro from the Infiltrator. They'd walk on by and the Infiltrator fly over them and still hit your backline. They changed that very recently. I'm glad they made the change, but it kind of really hurt. Like, the inability to counterplay Infiltrator was very frustrating to me for a good while. Mana Reaver. So originally, in order to proc Mana Reaver, you had to have 4 of them. They changed that down to 2. That was a good change, because you were never going to play 4 Mana Reaver. That wasn't going to happen. Good change. Kassadin. I complained about Kassadin before. I'm going to complain about him again. Him having Mana Reaver along with his CC ult was too much. That was too much counterplay in a single champion. Percent damage frustrates me. In particular, the way Misfortune deals her damage as percent base rather than a set damage over time frustrates me. I don't like it. It's annoying to me because it's all percentage based. So nothing I put on is like having better champions doesn't matter because all the damage is percentage based. Protector. So after Protector was nerfed, so that Protector shields did not infinitely stack, and that was done to blow up the Protector Mystic build that had just become overbearing on the meta. It was horrible to play against that build. Protector became unplayable. Protector is still kind of unplayable. I don't know, dude. I don't think you can fix Protector. Protector as it stands right now is not good. It's not good enough to play the game. Probably the only way I can think to fix it is if you start removing a lot of the one-shots out of the game. The current meta has a significant number of ways to just kind of one-shot a champion. One-shot, two-shot a champion. So in those cases, Protector is kind of meaningless. Protector gets more value in like attrition-based battles, where we're all just auto-attacking each other to death. And there is no auto-attacking to death in this game, outside of like Blaster. There is the spell that takes your half your health away. Along those range comes shield stacking. We saw with Protector how letting self-shield stack was excessive to a degree that made the game unbearable. I would like them to kind of look at how they want to set shield stacking. I'm of the opinion shields should stack to just the maximum amount you can get off one of the shields. So if you have a Poppy and a Karma, and the Karma grants shields to the Poppy, you shouldn't be able to get more shields than what Karma provides off Poppy ult. Unless Poppy ult gets more than the Karma shields. Whichever one gets more, that should be your max shield amount. I don't agree with stacking those shields on top of one another. I think that makes shields way too strong in this game. Vanguard 2 is still too strong. Plain and simple. Item balance. So we've messed around with the tier plus the cloak item. In set 2, it was Hush. The problem with Hush was that it prevented people from ulting, and people didn't like it when things weren't ulting. I'm like, that's cool. How do you like Cassidon when he disarms half your team? I didn't really think there was an issue with Hush, but I suspect knowing that how effective Blaster is at spreading debuffs, they saw ahead of time that this was going to be an issue. So they removed Hush and replaced it with Chalice, which became a degenerate item when put on low mana champions. So they have again removed it. In general, the mana gaining items kind of became overbearing at times in this set, particular on low mana champions like Ziggs and Sonya. And those two champions would just become mana printers. They served no purpose besides giving mana to something else. Now, that said, on Riot's defense, I suspect they didn't think that was actually going to be a build. Because in order to build that, you need 5 tiers. I was confused at the amount of consistency I saw people able to get 5 tiers. I was befuddled at how easily it seemed people could get 5 tiers. I'm assuming it's because tiers weren't very contested in this set. So it just happened. Next, a QSS. So they nerfed QSS coming into set 3. But at the same time, it's worth noting that I think set 3 has way more CC than set 2 had. Set 2 had CC. I don't think set 2 had CC to agree that set 3 had. I think CC in set 3 is a little out of control. And it's partially out of control because I think it has to be to stop some of the champions' ults that are in this set, because I think some of the ults are a bit too powerful. That's kind of my thought on QSS and CC. QSS has just kind of become a necessary item on a lot of builds in order to make sure that your champion with a channel doesn't get CC'd out of their ult. Red buff is OP. It's getting a nerf, thankfully, but red buff has been OP this whole set, and that's mostly because of how easily Blaster can spread out the debuff. Belts are awful. There's nothing to make with belts. You make a red buff, you make a Morello, and there's nothing else to make with a belt. You never want to see belts. Belts are a painful existence. This set also, and this goes in the fact that I think they linearized Star Guardian Sorcerer a bit too much. There's too many AD builds and not enough AP builds. There's way too much focus on AD items right now. There's not a lot of good AP builds else in the game. There's basically the only reason you really make AP items is when you're running Star Guardian Sorcerer or you have a GP. It's very odd to just. It's been easy for me because I generally don't do spell-based builds. I didn't really do a lot in set 2. In set 2 I mostly made AD builds. But I did occasionally build AP based on what items I had. In set 3, it's a lot harder to make good AP, especially in the early and mid game. It's very easy to make good AD. So I just make AD all the time. I don't think they can really fix this issue right now, but my hope is whenever we get to set 4 that there's a little more balance between the spellcasters and the physical damage. And lastly, Demo Spat was this, of all the mistakes made in the set, Demo Spat was the single greatest mistake of this set. If Demolitionist was a mistake, Demo Spat was the biggest mistake. Demo Spat is unreal how frustrating Demo Spat is. And I am really happy Demo Spat is gone. And with that, I can silently end my thoughts on set 3. So this has been a video on just kind of going over set 10.12 and what my thoughts on set 3 up until this point has been. Thankfully, from what we've talked about on set 10.12, a lot of the changes that have been made this patch do fix a lot of the issues that I had with the set so far. There's still some issues that are unresolved, but I'm not quite sure how they're going to how they can fix those. But I'm quite happy with 10.12. I kind of like what I'm seeing from the new set, so I'll end the video with that, and I can start actually playing the game now.